Welcome to Real PropTech, the conference about the transformation of the real estate industry.
My name is Bruno Acar. I'm Belgian, so therefore I'm speaking in English. I can also speak in German, but English is more appropriate. I started my career back in the old days with Jamba, so I don't have a real estate background. I have a background in e-commerce in general, and my partner and I, we got started with Home.Beat Live. Because I own 2 apartments, and in most of those buildings, things don't really function very well. Yeah, so what we set out to do is build a platform that focuses on a couple of themes which are relevant for home ownership association buildings. So in German, you would call them WEG-Objekte, yeah, or copropriété in French. Now, in most of these buildings, there's a lot of things that don't function well. I mean, the most obvious thing is communication. For there are already lots of solutions. But there's also multiple other dimensions. For instance, cost optimization. Now, typically, buildings have, I would say, a building of 20 units would have a budget on a yearly basis of about 100,000 euros. And in these budgets, there's lots of cost points which are not optimized, because typically property managers are normally entitled to do so, but rarely do so in practice because it's work for them for which they're not being paid. So it doesn't really make sense for them. So basically, what are we looking at? We're looking at a very large market of 20 million home ownership association units in Germany, yeah, which has about a 55 billion euro opportunity of budget that needs to be optimized. Yeah? So that is what we're looking at, and well, it's a global problem. Large mass. But what I'm here to present today is actually how does this work in terms of distribution and cooperation with large corporations. Now, before we get started, I brought some material from the Boston Consulting Group, yeah, that is pointing at what's actually happening in the market. Now, they did a survey of about 570 companies, what are they doing, how are they dealing with digitalization, with innovation, and so on, and there's multiple ways of doing that. Yeah? All types of vehicles, VCs, accelerators, in-house projects, all kinds of ways, and we see that since 2012, there's actually been a fairly sharp acceleration of interest and uptake of corporations to work with startups. But if we dig a little bit deeper, 45% of corporates and 55% of startups are actually not very much satisfied with what's going on. Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons which are the basis of that dissatisfaction. Yeah, and that's what I wanted to zoom in a bit more in detail, and also with a couple of practical experiences that we had with 3 corporations. Yeah? So if you look at these numbers, on the left-hand side, you see in order of importance what corporates say is more important to them, yeah, piloting and so on, and at the other side, how they see it's being fulfilled. Now, everything which is green is actually good and above what they would expect. But red, for instance, is getting access to IT and know-how from the startups themselves. If you look at, for instance, what startup expectations are, typically a very clear red point is funding. Yeah, because from a startup perspective, a lot of these initiatives seem like a big circus. Yeah, we can get to jump through hoops as a startup organization, and to have a kind of me too. We're also being agile. We're also being innovative. But at the end of the road, there's not very much happening. There's actually too much of that, and especially from a startup's point of view, there is a mismatch of expectations in very many cases. So here you have an overview of the failures that are at the basis of most of these mismatches. But what I wanted to focus on is for instance, our own experience as a participant in an accelerator. Now, there's an accelerator that took place in Essen, where you have lots of these brands which are world-renowned being present, like Miele, Gira, Weiland, who have put together this accelerator to get access to new technology and information. And basically what we did is we did a cooperation with Gira and Weiland, to make their infrastructure smart and retrofit it, and to bring it beyond typical IoT, which is predictive maintenance in many cases for these central infrastructures, but also bring the information all the way down to the end user, to be the social graph of these infrastructures. So that if an elevator is out of service, that it doesn't only call the technician, but also informs the people who are affected by an outage. Yeah? So that was a very interesting use case which we developed and also presented at IFA last year. But at the end of the line, we weren't that happy with what we did there for a number of reasons. First of all, yes, we did a proof of concept. Yes, we had a reputation increase. Yes, we had market visibility and learning experience, but this wasn't really a growth impact. Yeah, there wasn't really a financial consequence by it. Yeah, and that's something that from a startup's perspective feels a bit like a bit of waste of time. Yeah, because the timelines that PropTechs are working with versus what large corporations are looking at are very different. Yeah, 6 months for a corporation feels like very, very fast, but for a startup it feels like an eternity to do so. Another corporation that we have is Vattenfall. Now Vattenfall, it's already been pointed out, all energy providers are now scrambling to start bundling the services. And just like telecom doesn't want to be just a pipeline of bits going back and forth, they want to add value with adding services to their mix. And also in the energy space, the exact same thing is happening. Now in energy, you have two types of forms of energy corporations. You have B2C for end users, well, there's already lots of activity. So for instance, Vattenfall, they would give end users free minutes for Lime bikes and stuff like that. Yeah, so for the B2C segment, there's already lots of things that are being added on top of the typical contracts. But in the B2B side of things, like the provisioning of energy for buildings, there hasn't been much going on. So what we're doing with Vattenfall is that Vattenfall customers can get Home.Beat Live Pro for free, paid for by Vattenfall. Now for us, obviously, that's something that's quite interesting. Yeah, because for us, it means revenue and distribution. Yeah, we get rub-off of the brand, we get market visibility, yeah, great stuff. But again, it was very slow. So even a company like Vattenfall needs to start thinking about, okay, how does this affect my internal processes? Yeah, how does this affect decision-making in the whole chain? How do we actually verify that the user is a Vattenfall customer? Yeah, how do we do the checking of those matches? So a lot of these tiny details take an awful lot of time to finalize. Yeah, so until you get the whole process straight, yeah, from the corporation, from the general concept towards having it implemented on the ground, takes an enormous amount of time and effort. Yeah, so that should not be underestimated at all. So internal accountability and resources is also a topic. So you can have a unit deciding, yes, we're going to do a corporation, but at the end of the line, those salespeople need to go bring it into the market. And if they don't have clear deliverables that they are measured towards, then there's not going to be much happening in the beginning. So all of these little things, which doesn't seem to be very important in the beginning, are very important for the actual implementation. Yeah? And that takes an awful lot of time and effort on both sides. Now we've got another partnership ongoing, and that's Allianz. Yeah, Allianz is a very large organization. They do lots of things from financing, but also one of their core competencies being insurances. Now, any insurance has got a massive amount of damage regulation to do on a yearly basis. Yeah? And if you compare that on the other side, that most buildings don't have a emergency protocol in place. It means that in most buildings, if you have a water leak, you dial 112 in Germany or 911 in the United States. And you call for help, and you hope and pray that things will fall in its place and damage will not be too difficult. But that is a very suboptimal way of protecting, which is in many cases the largest asset that people have. Yeah, so every minute that water is running through a building, there is an increase of damage that goes exponentially. So especially in modern buildings, where lots of fast construction walls are being implemented, water and plaster do not match very well. So when you have a leakage in a building, which is the #1 cause of damage in buildings, it's about time. Yeah, it's about managing the response as fast and as adequately as possible. And that is something that we can fix through communication and having response plans in place to know where the main water valves of the building are, in which room, who's got access, what do I need to do? Yeah? Because in times of need, time is critical. Yeah? So what we did with Allianz is a distribution partnership. So for Allianz, they want to reduce the risk profile of buildings, yeah, and we want to distribute our product. And we found us to do that jointly. And basically what we saw is that distribution went very well, reputation increased, market visibility, but even here, it was extremely slow to get moving. Because you have in these large corporations so many stakeholders, so many people who want to have a say in these kind of decisions, that it takes an enormous amount of time to do so. Yeah, so Allianz we started talking about a year ago, and we only gotten started last May. Yeah, so it's really a painstaking process to get from initial concept towards real implementation. Now, from our experience, the factors for success are actually having a clear shared goal for the partnership. As already been pointed out, top management ownership is a must. Without it, it will not fly. Clear metrics from the start. What are you measuring? What is success and what is failure? Yeah, how do you measure that? Allocate necessary resources. Yeah, because having a concept is one thing, bringing it to fly is something else. Clear deliverables with corporate staff. And define also next steps. Because if you implement something, what is the next step? If this works, what is the next thing that we're going to do together? So that you have a clear communication on expectations on both sides. And as a tip towards corporates, be kind to startups. It's hard. Thank you.